This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome to the latest, the freshest edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and company. I am your host, Vito Jerome Chirco, here for episode number 96 of the pod, alongside my usual sidekick and partner in crime. That is the Doc from Doc and Jock, John Charles Macaroon. John, how's it going?
For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. Vito, I stayed up Monday evening to watch the Detroit Tigers take on the Seattle Mariners. And what I saw really made me question my sanity, because you sit there as a Tigers fan and a guy that's doing podcasts that's really kind of crazy about Detroit sports, and you sit and you watch and you go, okay, does my manager give the team the best chance to win? And when I logically look at that question, I say to myself, wow, on Monday, they had a great opportunity to win the game. Anibal Sanchez, most of us thought was going to bomb out there. He goes out there and gives you 5 good innings, and it's 2-2. You go out there and Alex Wilson, I feel like he's pitching every single game. And you go out there and you throw out Alex Wilson, who must be feeling such angst and anger because he's struggling so much. But then you see that a decision is made, a vital decision. Alex Wilson had given up a 2-run bomb. You go out there and you decide to throw out K-Rod into that ball game. And what does he do? Inevitably, gives up another home run. And so with your 2 bullpen arms, you give up 4 runs and you're losing 6-2. I say to myself, Brad Ausmus is really not doing much to help the cause for the Detroit Tigers. And you can't continue to have losing streaks where you're going to lose 7 out of 10 games. Because guess what's happening, Vito? As we record this podcast, the Indians are on fire. KC is on fire. And at this point in time, when I look at some of the issues with the Tigers, we're going to get into the myriad of problems that they've had. It just kind of tells me that Brad Ausmus is overmatched, and right now we're coming to a point where we're seeing probably the end of days for the manager of the Tigers, Brad Ausmus, because it's starting to look like the ship's falling apart.
But it's more than Brad at this point. The team's roster is overmatched. It is flawed, has a myriad of issues. And you look at the Indians coming on now, they're red hot, winners of 6 in a row, a season-high 6 games above 500 as well, a 2.5-game lead in the AL Central. The Tigers, by the way, sit at 32-37 going into Tuesday night. 5.5 games back of the first-place Indians. And the Tigers right now, the sad state of their team is that they're closer to last place than to first place. The White Sox are only a half game back of the Tigers for 4th place in the American League Central. And the White Sox's payroll, it pales in comparison to the Tigers' payroll. That should tell you right there, to lead off on this week's edition of Tigers Talk, that should tell you that the Tigers have to go into a huge sell now mode. They can't waste any more time. It is sell now mode.
How do you have a homestand, 6 games, and you only win 2 of them? I had the opportunity to go down and watch the Tigers after Victor Martinez was held up in the hospital due to an irregular heartbeat. So I took my nephew down Friday, and the lineup was set. It was a lineup that I felt was poised to do some damage. And that game Friday was really frustrating and rewarding at the exact same time. Rewarding, 1, because they played a complete 9-inning game where Daniel Norris was effective. The defense showed up to play, and you had a bunch of different guys making highlight reel plays. SportsCenter was filled with Detroit Tigers. Justin Upton, Jose Iglesias making circus catches, doing some things. They showed energy. They showed passion. You had home runs from Alex Avila. Ian Kinsler led off the game with the home run. You scored 13 runs, and you blow out the Tampa Bay Rays. And that was coming after a victory on Thursday to start the series. Now you're saying, good, you're 2-2 in the series. You're going to head to the weekend strong. You're going to play well. You just scored 13 runs. You took out a guy that was struggling with Victor Martinez's injury and his hospital stay because of his irregular heartbeat. You thought the lineup was going to kick into overdrive. What happens on the weekend? They lay 2 duds back to back. And you look at it and you go, after scoring 13 runs, they haven't scored more than 4 in any of the games as of this recording. And so it's frustrating because they can't sustain any level of success. But I'm so thankful my nephew got to see great baseball. He was locked in from pitch 1 to the end of the game. And I really felt like at that time, when I went, I'm like, oh boy, Logan Morrison is going to do some damage. He waited till Father's Day to unleash what he can do on the baseball diamond. My goodness, what a beast. He's a big dude in person as well. But it's frustrating because you know it, and now everyone in town knows it. This team cannot sustain a level of consistency because, the notion that everyone's looking at is, we're going to make a run. We're going to do some things. We're going to get on a stretch where we're going to win 7 out of 10 games. I don't think this team has it in them to make a run to get back in it. So the weekend left me frustrated, and a homestand going 2-4 is completely unacceptable at this point in time in the season.
Doc, and now the Boo Birds have come out strongly. Justin Verlander got on the defensive last week about the Boo Birds, saying that, well, let's be optimistic that we won. Remember, Miguel Cabrera hit the game winner. They were even booing him at Comerica Park last week. I didn't like that, but there is now the question, the topic that we have to discuss is the booing and whether or not it's acceptable from Tigers fans too, Doc.
Yeah, before we get into the booing and things like that, because I feel like it might have had a negative impact on Miguel Cabrera. When he hits the game-winning home run and he's trotting around and you see his celebration, did you take pause at all in regards to his celebration or lack thereof? Because it seems like, for a guy that had been struggling and was trying to come out of it, do you think the booing from the fans prior made him frustrated because he's hit into a double play and the fans kind of, the Bronx cheer kind of thing where they were booing him? Do you think that affected him? Because I would think when you hit a game winner, a walk-off, and you have an opportunity to cheer with your teammates and your boys, it just seemed like the whole team was like on some kind of, lethargic medicine. It's just kind of like he ran around the bases, they huddled up, a couple taps on the back, and that was it. I kind of felt like the celebration on Thursday night when Miguel Cabrera had the walk-off was pretty subdued. It was different. Did you take that? Did you take away that he was a little bit subdued or that the celebration was a little off?
Well, maybe the fans had a negative impact on him leading into that walk-off home run that he hit. I'm thinking it might have been that with Miggy. Now, the thing is, too, if I'm Miguel Cabrera going to be a Hall of Famer one day and in Cooperstown as a representative of the Detroit Tigers, I'm saying to myself that F all you Boo Birds out there in my head. I'm not going to say it verbally, okay, or make it known like Tyler Collins did when he said F you to everybody at the ballpark last season. He's not stupid, Miguel Cabrera, like that. He thinks about stuff before he acts, it seems like typically. And Miguel Cabrera there's no rhyme or reason to boo Miguel Cabrera. And he has every right to feel offended, to feel pissed off towards the Tigers fan base that was there at that game booing him when he's a future Hall of Famer going to be wearing a Tigers cap in Cooperstown one day. He's going in as a Detroit Tiger, and that doesn't happen every so often. It's been a long time since a guy was enshrined into Cooperstown as a Detroit Tigers Hall of Famer. Remember that note, and remember how great Miguel Cabrera has been in a Tigers uni as well. A multiple-time American League MVP winner with the Tigers, remember, a Triple Crown winner with the Tigers, and when they haven't won and have gotten so close, it's not really on Miguel Cabrera's shoulders. You can't blame him. He's done everything possible, realistically, from an offensive standpoint, to get it done for the Tigers and to get them to the promised land. So we're going to start booing him now. I don't find there being anything acceptable about that when it comes to booing Miguel Cabrera. Now,
what a stupid thing to say.
I totally disagree with that,
no,
Vito.
I'm going to say this. Other players, yes, it's fine to boo, because I wanted to say that because I know what other people like yourself would think.
Vito, when you pay, upwards of $30 plus for a ticket, here's the way I want you to kind of reverse engineer it, okay? I think that athletes should kind of look at booing as a sign that the fans still care. Because what does it mean when a fan boos? It means they're unhappy with something. It means that they still care because they're upset that they want to be cheering. That's the way I would look at it. So if a media member stuck a camera in my face after booing, I would just say, you know what? It's up to me to silence the crowd. It's up to me to give the fans what they want. And I totally understand and respect the fans that do boo because it shows passion. It shows that you're into the game. Because when you watch a game, when you're there and you want the team to win, you feel like you're part of the action. And you're booing because you're upset that you want to be cheering. And so the Tigers should be careful because if they keep telling the fans what to do, in future years, if they struggle, there won't be that many fans. You're already starting to see attendance drop. you're starting to see kind of poor attitudes regarding the Tigers. Many people, when we start talking about Tigers and we start throwing out polls, have said, really, I'd rather watch something else on TV. I'd rather watch Netflix. I'd rather go out and hang out with the boys and have some cocktails. The Tigers are close to kind of losing this fan base because many people, when they went out to Father's Day, there was a large audience that watched what many people called a listless performance where the Tigers didn't do much and they got their ass handed to them on Father's Day in front of a big crowd. So if you're going to go out there and talk about what the fans should and should not be doing, I don't think that's where you need to, put your energy. And for Justin Verlander and, guys like that in the media that are, partnering with the team and talking to the audience, telling fans what to do, you can't stay positive on a team that's under 500, that's not playing well, that goes out there and you see the difference in effort on a night like Friday versus Saturday and Sunday.
But Sunday, remember, it was Buck Farmer on the mound.
But
and it come a time with Buck Farmer where he was due for a bad performance. It's Buck Farmer, remember. So I feel bad for the Tigers fans there on Sunday because it's Father's Day. You want to enjoy Father's Day and watch the Tigers win or make it competitive. With Buck Farmer on the mound, you have no chance of that happening, and we didn't have a chance as Tigers fans to watch a competitive ball game on Sunday, on Father's Day, largely because of that lackluster performance out of Buck Farmer.
So I have a right to boo. If I pay my hard money...
boo him. I'm saying booing Miguel Cabrera is a little bit distasteful because of what he's done in a Tigers uniform.
Listen,
you can. I'm saying it's a little bit distasteful still.
When you're making $50,000 an at-bat, okay,
it's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
$28 million this season he's making.
The reason why you get paid that much money is to be professional and to handle the cheers because, they'll accept the cheers. They'll accept the free beers around town. They'll accept all the praise and all the endorsements to say, hey, buy this because Miguel said so. But if you struggle, then you say, I don't want none of the bad. Unfortunately, when you sign your name and the ink is dry on that A after you sign Miguel Cabrera, you realize that your life has changed and you're now beholden to the expectations of making $30 million a year. And so taking boos is nothing. Really, I look at it, I'm like, why doesn't anybody have thick skin? I make fun of you every week. You show up here every single week knowing that I'm going to say something derogatory about you or I'm going to say something about you that's not going to be as flattering as you like, but you keep showing up here and you got big boy pants and you say, well, no, I understand what you're saying about this, but I also could look at it from this viewpoint. You give back a little bit and we have a give and take and we go forward in the efforts to make this show as good as possible. You have thick skin. You're not a baby. I don't know. Are you leaving here and crying when I talk to you about...
There are some nights where I do cry and don't fall asleep until I get a good cry. And so let's remember that. I haven't Sorry about never clearing the air about that before.
No problem.
Really quick, Miguel Cabrera didn't say anything. It was Justin Verlander. Now, Verlander should have kept his mouth shut. I was just saying booing Miguel Cabrera. Remember this, too. Look at his stats. He joined the Tigers in 2008. Look at his stats, how good he's been in a Tigers uni. This is the first season you can really say Miguel Cabrera hasn't performed up to par. Hasn't been Miguel Cabrera and is maybe finally nearing the downside of his career. Outside of 2017, look at his numbers and how great they've been.
But
remember
sometimes
that
you have to accept the fact that you're going to get booed because of the fact you're the leader.
But he's played through a lot of stuff, remember?
Hey, if you hit into a double play,
injuries.
If you hit into a double play and there's runners on base and you could have helped your team win, you expect some boos, get back on the horse the next time, and when you hit a walk-off, show some excitement, show some passion, stand in front of the media. Don't only stand in front of the media when the going is good. Miguel has kind of a reputation where he doesn't talk to the media as much as some of the other guys, and he stands in front of the camera when things are going well. But sometimes he disappears and doesn't want to talk to the media when things are not going so well. And so I would just sit here and tell you this, Vito. As a professional athlete, part of the job requirements that you need to deal with is critiques, constructive criticism, personal criticism, and people booing you at your home stadium. And so for Justin Verlander to come out here and say, let's focus on the positives. No, we did focus on the positives.
For a long time, right?
And he did have a good performance. But you also have to tell the whole story. Part of the reason why JV is struggling is a ton of walks, elevated walk numbers each performance. And so when a reporter as skilled and trained as Matt Shepard comes to you and asks the question, you don't have your colleagues saying, why are you focusing on the 5 walks? We're not focusing on it. We're asking a complete, thorough review of your performance. Great job. You only gave up a few runs. You gave your team a solid chance to win the game, but you also put your team at risk of losing by having an elevated walk count because those things are factors that lead to extra runs. And so maybe that game you got out of it, you dodged the bullets. But in future games, in future performances, if you're going to walk 5, 6, 7 guys, you're putting the team at risk for big innings, and Justin Verlander has done that. That's been the bugaboo with him is inconsistency, a lot of big innings, and his lack of ability to get guys out and to keep his pitch count down. So I don't begrudge reporters or fans from telling the whole story. Yes, there are positives with this Tiger team. It's not all negative. There are guys like Alex Avila that are doing wonders for the team, that are helping the team win. Yes, there are pitchers that are doing some things here and there and are trying to work their way out of struggles like Daniel Norris and Jordan Zimmerman. Yes, there are signs of great defensive plays at times from Jose Iglesias, and you're starting to see his bat pick up. Yes, there are positives, but I think because of the losing, the heightened emphasis on the losing is really getting to the guys, and it's stupid because when you come out and tell the fans, don't boo, focus on the positive, then you're telling people not to be real.
Yeah.
So stop talking about what the fans should and should not be doing and just get back on the horse the next day. If you're asked about the walks, just say, look, it's obvious I cannot walk this many batters. I got to do better. That's it. It's an easy answer. Just stop telling the fans what to do, because anytime you do that, you're going to get 40,000 fingers pointed back at you. And the Tigers right now are in no position to be talking to the fans. Just put your nose to the grindstone, win some games.
But you know what it says about Verlander and the Tigers clubhouse as a whole? There's no strong clubhouse leader. And then it was talked about on FM radio in 90s from One The Tick. I think Mike Valenia brought up the topic and had his callers calling in about it. It said the Tigers don't have that legit, strong presence in the clubhouse that knows when to talk, when not to talk, and what to say in certain circumstances, such as JV and what he was faced with last week when he started well. But in the grand scheme of things, his start that last time out for Verlander, and really it starts as a whole, it's more about that. He hasn't been masterful Justin Verlander. Remember, his walks have been elevated. He allows the long ball still a little bit too much, as he has now, well, since last year specifically, when he allowed a lot of long balls too, despite his great earned run average and fielding independent pitching. So these guys have to take the criticism a little bit better, because it looks like they're soft when Verlander comes out and says what he did when they're under 500 as a ball club. So you have to grow some thick skin. And the thing is, I think a stronger leader, wouldn't have spoke upon what he did going on the defensive regarding the Boo Birds like he did. And then, once again, reverting back to the Mike Valeni talk and what he had talked about on his show, he had brought up, and his callers were bringing up, that leaders in the past of these great Detroit professional sports teams, such as Isaiah Thomas, Bill Laimbeer of the Pistons, guys like that, I think even Stevie Y was brought up, Steve Yzerman of the Red Wings, guys like that wouldn't have brought up what Verlander did, going on the defensive as strongly as Verlander did, when there has been stuff that has been affecting Verlander's arsenal or overall performances on a consistent basis. Because once again, he hasn't been the masterful Justin Verlander that's been an American League Cy Young candidate like last year when he should have won it. He's been much more of a third or fourth starter this year. When you really sum it all up in his performances collectively, that's what you could say about him this year. And he hasn't been the best starting pitcher in the Tigers' rotation, to say the least. It's been the sophomore, Michael Fulmer. And then maybe, I guess you could say Verlander. But still, Verlander hasn't pitched up to par. Hasn't pitched like last year, and hasn't pitched like the legit ace of the starting pitching staff that he should be, Doc. So he has to be open to a little bit of criticism, and especially when, once again, your team is at the state that it's in, which is being an under 500 ball club that looks like it has to sell, and start selling quickly here, Doc, as we have talked about numerous times on this podcast.
You said it. On this fine podcast, you lined up a couple great guests. Who do we have upcoming that's going to fill us in a little bit on what the heck is going on with these Tigers and previewing a little bit more about the Tigers versus the Mariners?
2 Detroit Free Press sports guys. Ryan Ford, who's been on how many times now? My God, we got to cut him off now. And then Anthony Fenech, the Tigers, a beat writer for the Detroit Free Press. They'll be along with us after this quick commercial break here on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. Doc, as you know, our newest sponsor is the Detroit Sports Commission, and since 2001, the Detroit Sports Commission has applied its expert touch to marketing and to selling the Metro Detroit area as a marquee destination for regional, national, and even international amateur sporting events. And through the Detroit Sports Commission's help, these events have attracted thousands of visitors and pumped millions of dollars into our local economy. It is why Detroit is now not only the place where champions are made, but also the place where championships are played. To find out more about the Detroit Sports Commission and all of the events they're bringing to our region, please follow the DSC on Twitter and on Instagram at DET Sports, and check out their fine website at DetroitSports.org. And now joining me on episode number 96 of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company is Ryan Ford of the Detroit Free Press. Ryan, how's it going?
Going good.
Hey, good to have you on once again. And we got to talk about your Mariners and the Tigers playing against them Monday night and have a series on the road at Safeco Field, 4 straight games against the M's. Let me just ask you, Monday night, what did you think of Anibal's performance? And his first start of the 2017 campaign, by the way, too.
It's better than I thought he would, honestly. I wasn't expecting much, so it's a low bar to clear. But I thought even when he got in trouble, he mostly was able to work his way out of it. He had some really nice pitches at times. Looked like his slider was working well. He especially had the split finger fastball going. But once again, he got hit by the long ball a little bit. Not a shocker.
No, not at all. I mean, Anibal has been troubled by that all season long. And the Tigers, the grand scheme of things, what stands out to you as their biggest issue at this juncture in the season?
I would probably say it's been the starting pitching. It's been very inconsistent. They really haven't gotten the performances they wanted or needed from the young kids. I mean, I know that's something we talked about going into the season was I thought that was a particular strength of theirs if it came through, and it really hasn't. I mean, Fulmer's been as good as advertised, but everyone else has been incredibly inconsistent, from Verlander all the way down.
Yeah, I mean, Verlander, I would say, has to be blamed a little bit. And then you see him last week get on the defensive when the Boo Birds came out at Comerica Park. Doc and I, my co-host and I, were talking about this very matter before you came on here, Ryan. And for me, I didn't like the booing of Miguel Cabrera. But the thing is, I can understand why the fans are booing these Tigers who are under 500, are closer to last place than to first place at this point. And they're dropping fast. It seems like losers of 3 straight now going into this recording on Tuesday. So for me, Ryan, once again, didn't like the booing of Miguel. But for, the Tigers as a whole, I can see why they're getting booed by the fans at Comerica Park. How about yourself?
I suppose, understand it. I'm not a big fan of booing a team, especially when they're not playing great. They're not playing poorly. I mean, they're roughly a 500 team. And yeah, they look to be trending away from 500 rather than toward 500. But this is kind of the team that we thought they were. I mean, it was going to take a lot for them to compete. I mean, they've got a huge payroll, so I understand that. But then again, that's the Illich's money, not the fans. I mean, fans are buying the hot and readies, I suppose. But it's at some point. Team is what they are, and it's not as though this team is expected to stampede to the World Series or anything. So I don't entirely understand booing, but I guess someone's got to get upset. So
you know what, Ryan? It doesn't look like they're going to make a World Series run as they keep falling and just losing some games where it looks like they should be winning, but the bullpen collapses. And a lot of times, too, the offense has been a problem where they haven't performed against lackluster starting arms. And we've seen it be a problem, a common theme for the Tigers and their issues in the past. And it's catching up to them maybe even more this season. And as a roster, collectively speaking, the Tigers are just simply flawed. And for me, it seems like with their big payroll, they have to start cutting that payroll. And I think sooner than later. So for me, I'm all in on a full-fledged fire sale, I guess you could say. How about yourself at this point in the season?
It makes more sense to trade early rather than later. There's a point. I think we're reaching it. Early July is usually the time where teams start really crystallizing their playoff thoughts, although it's tricky because no team in the American League is more than, I think, about 5 games out of the playoff right now. So it's tough to say sell, sell, sell. But there are a lot of buyers possibly. I think JD absolutely will be gone, which as a fan I'm a little sad about because I like watching him hit, and I can't imagine where this team would be this year without his bat since he came back off the disabled list. As far as other guys, I think Upton, he's a tough one to trade to get a large return on just because there's a question of if he keeps hitting like this, he'll likely opt out of his contract. And if he doesn't hit like this and doesn't opt out of his contract, then you really don't want to pay him all that money. But beyond that, I don't know how many assets they have to sell.
Well, that's the thing, tradable assets, and it's about contracts, too. Miguel Cabrera's contract is huge. Verlander's is huge. Upton's even is huge. Alex Avila's isn't. And he's been quite the performer this year out of nowhere. And you know what? The Tigers have benefited from him big time because James McCann hasn't gotten it done behind the plate consistently. He's been hampered by injury. So for me, Avila has probably been the biggest surprise, and I think he's a tradable asset right now. What do you think, Ryan? And what do you think could they potentially get in return for Al Avila's son?
I do think he's an asset. For me, he's one that I'd probably hold on to. I guess you can't be too sentimental, and he's not a guy you're necessarily going to build around. But I just don't know how much you can get for, a catcher who is hitting well. He'll help someone, but much more than a relief prospect. The trade market has kind of tightened up lately. I don't think teams are going to sell the bank for catcher / part-time first baseman in his 30s on a short-term deal. But I guess if there's a return there, you kind of have to get it, especially since he'll be a free agent soon. And so, I guess if you can get a solid relief prospect, Lord knows the Tigers could probably use some help in the bullpen too.
Yeah.
Solidified a little bit.
Well, yeah, they have a lot of bullpen arms that aren't getting it done, Ryan. K-Rod, and it's not just K-Rod. We got a few guys right now in that Tigers bullpen that just aren't cutting the mustard seed that need to go by the wayside sooner than later. And it'll be interesting to see what they do with K-Rod if he'll be gone before the end of the season, a guy such as that who hasn't performed all season long. So if they can get an arm like that for Avila, you would think that's what the market is for Alex Avila too. So I think you've hit it right on the head there regarding him and his trade market. Now, regarding your Mariners really quick, and what the heck are they going to do as that non-waiver trade deadline nears?
I'm not expecting a whole lot just because most of the assets they have are sort of long-term guys they want to hang on to. Robinson Cano has an insane contract, and they basically had to throw money at him to get him to sign in Seattle. So they're not trading him. They're not trading Nelly Cruz, even though his contract is a little more affordable. They're not trading Kyle Seager, who they just gave a contract extension to. As far as they don't really have any arms to deal, really. Part of the problem with the Mariners is that 4/5 of their what was projected as their opening day rotation has spent significant time on the disabled list. They haven't gotten a single start from Drew Smyly, who they traded for in the offseason, former Tiger Drew Smyly. And from there, King Felix has been hurt. Iwakumo should be coming off the disabled list this weekend, along with Felix Hernandez. James Paxton, who's starting Wednesday night, just got off the disabled list. He's still kind of trying to find his form. I won't say they're not going to make a trade because they have the trading as general manager there ever was, Jerry Dipoto. I think he's basically shuffled almost the entire 40-man roster solely via trade in the last 2 seasons. But he's much more of a winter trader than a summer trader, if such a thing can be. Much along the lines of actually Dave Dombrowski. So I really don't know what moves they're going to make, especially because there isn't the inclination to burn it all down. They just gave Gene Segura, another guy they traded for in the offseason who has been hurt. They just gave him a 5-year contract extension. So it really feels like they're taking a long view.
And Ryan, you brought up King Felix, who's been an enigma this season. He hasn't been that productive, not like King Felix of past. And also he's been hurt, as you noted, too. What do you think is his future in Seattle? And do you see him making a turnaround and becoming that ace-caliber arm once again at the top of the Mariners' rotation?
I can absolutely see that in the same way. Honestly, Justin Verlander provides a pretty good template for that in terms of being hurt for the first time in a career, losing velocity, having to relearn how to pitch without that A-level fastball, getting back there, just sort of not saying, becoming a crafty righty or anything, but learning to mix your pitches differently, to attack hitters in different ways than you had previously. And once he's fully healthy, which may not even happen this year, he's supposed to, like I said, come off the disabled list sometime in the next week or so. He's been pitching. He's looked excellent in rehab, but again, it's AAA rehab, so who's to say? I think that would be my best case scenario for him. I can't ever see him not being there. He's just been with the club too long, and honestly, he's got a pretty solid big money contract too that I can't see as being easy to move.
Ryan Ford of the Detroit Free Press with me on episode number 96 of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. Ryan, I see one sexy pitching matchup in this series with the Mariners, and that is Wednesday night with James Paxton on the mound taking on Justin Verlander. That's one I want to tune into. I think the masses will as well that are Tigers fans that still really care about the Tigers this season. Now, what do you see happening in that game? Who has the edge, and who has the edge of the rest of this series, in your opinion?
I tend to think the Tigers have the edge in that one just because, you have JV, although he hasn't pitched that well on the road. But also, I'm still a little bit worried about Paxton because he was lights out before he went on the disabled list. And, he's pretty much the hardest throwing left-handed starter in the big, which is up there about 97 miles an hour. Normally that would be a little overwhelming, but really hasn't quite got a little rocked in his first couple of starts off the DL. So until he actually shows that he's back in that form, and that was his problem for the past few years, was he never really could stay healthy long enough to find his form. But until he does that, I'm a little bit hesitant, although there is a guy sort of that can give the Tigers problems. It's a hard-throwing lefty. But I'm excited to see it because I do think it's the best matchup of the series. I'm not that overwhelmed by the rest of the Tuesday night's game with Ariel Miranda on the mound. Should be solid. But Thursday, the Mariners are throwing Giovanni Gallardo out there, who somehow has been the only starter not hurt. And, watching him every 5 days hasn't been exactly fun. So I like the Tigers' chances the rest of the series, or at least to get a series split, I'd say.
Yeah, it seems like we've been hoping for that with the Tigers in every single series because that's like the best case scenario right now with the Tigers. And maybe they do that. Maybe they even win this series, but I'm going to say no, and I don't see them winning a ton of series going forward in 2017, and that's why you've got to sell. That's my opinion, and that was all of the opinions of Ryan Ford on the Tigers as well from the Detroit Free Press. Ryan, thanks for all the time as usual.
My pleasure.
And you can check out Ryan Ford's work via the Detroit Free Press and its sports section for all of his latest and greatest page designs and gizmo production. It's called Gizmos, Doc. How about that?
Always good to check out the work of Ryan Ford. Great insights regarding the series matchup between the Tigers and the Mariners. Always great to talk to Ryan Ford and check in with him. Who's up next? Who are we dialing up here on the phone lines?
Mr. Anthony Fenech, also of the Detroit Free Press. He is the Tigers beat writer for the Freep 2. And now joining me on episode number 96 of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company is the Tigers beat writer for the Detroit Free Press, and that is Anthony Fenech. Anthony, how's it going?
Good. What's up, Vito? How you doing?
Very good, man. Good to hear from you. It's been a long time and way too long, and we have a myriad of issues now to dive into regarding the Tigers. But first and foremost, last week there was an incident at Comerica Park where the Boo Birds came out after a Miguel Cabrera double play, and it got, not ugly, but Verlander had his comments in the postgame regarding the fans and the Boo Birds, and he got on the defensive there regarding all that. What did you think when that happened, when Verlander took that stance with those Boo Birds at Comerica Park last week?
Well, I just think it was one of the Tigers franchise players sticking up for another one of the Tigers franchise players, and to be honest with you, I agree with Verlander. I just don't think you can boo a guy like Miguel Cabrera. It's pretty obvious that he was out there playing in pain and has been for X amount of weeks now, probably closer to a month. But I think the booing is just a product of the unrest of the fan base right now. I think this is a very concerned fan base. I think this is a worried fan base. They're upset. They can sense that their run, their close to 10-year run at near the top of the American League Central is over, and there could be some dark times ahead. So I think there's a lot of frustration, and we saw it, a couple nights later when the fans were booing Francisco Rodriguez, which is a completely different topic, but I just think it was Verlander that was sticking up for Cabrera, his longtime teammate, and really a guy that's going to go down as the best Tigers hitter of all time.
And Verlander was trying to be the clubhouse leader. Now, fans in recent memory have been picking apart the Tigers clubhouse for the lack of a vocal and strong leader inside that clubhouse. What do you think about that concern expressed by Tigers fans in recent memory?
Well, I think they have a bit of a vocal leader in Ian Kinsler. He's the guy that, to me, through his actions and And in words sometimes has been that kind of a leader, but he said to grow into that role, I don't think he's just a natural stand-up, boisterous kind of leader. I think that, many people look to Cabrera for that, but I don't really think he's that kind of person either. I do think that at some level there's a little bit of a leadership void, but I don't think it's an extreme problem when you have a guy like Kinsler and so many veterans in the team. This isn't necessarily a young team that needs to show them the way in the ropes. Victor Martinez, I'm talking about him as a leader. I don't really think that he's much of a leader anymore these days. But really, like I said, this is a veteran team, and they just should be playing better regardless of leadership. These guys know they've been around the game for so long. I don't think leadership is the problem amongst the players in the clubhouse.
Yeah, the Tigers' issues to me, too, Anthony, are more deeply rooted with the club's construction as a roster. It's more of that for me than leadership issues, which maybe there has been that present in the past with the Tigers clubhouse. But for me, it's about how the roster is constructed. And for me, it's not good enough. And you look at the Tigers right now, as you know, Anthony, 5 games below 500, 5.5 games out of the AL Central first place spot. And for me, more and more, it seems like the Tigers aren't going to make the playoffs, too. Now, my next question here for you is a part of a segment that I call Big Vito's Over-Under, and over-under 50% for the Tigers' chances of making the playoffs in 2017.
I'd definitely go under at this point. I mean, especially given the fact that they're 5.5 behind the Indians, who are really just heating up, and the Indians are better than the Tigers. I just think, I don't know, maybe I put it on like 25, 30%. I'm not really sure of the odds makers, but yeah, I mean, I'm kind of on board with you. Look, this team has a lot of talent. All right, like a week to 10 days ago, when Justin Upton hit a grand slam in Boston, I mean, scoring on the play was Miguel Cabrera, J.D. Martinez, Victor Martinez. I mean, the Tigers have a ton of talent on their team, but a lot of that talent is past its prime. And like many scouts have relayed, like this just looks like an old and slow team, and I think we're seeing I think we're seeing this core grown stale with the fan base a little bit. I just think that it's time, but on the same hand, right, as we speak, I believe every team in the American League is within 5.5 games or 4.5 games of a wild card spot. Whether or not that's false hope, I think a lot of it is, but I do think that right now with the trade market not really doing anything, I don't think you force you to trade with somebody. I just think you kind of wait it out and see if this team can't go on a run. Because hey, if they can go on a run, which I'm not expecting, say they win 7 out of 10, well, that's a completely different story, and especially with so many games against Cleveland left, but. Yeah, I'd probably put their chances, 20, 30% in that range.
And because, Anthony, as you labeled it yourself, they look slow and old, and on the downside of their careers as a collective whole, it looks like this unit and how it's been constructed when you look at their lineup. And as you said, all the talent there that's been amassed over the years, but they look old and not the same. So that leads into this, Anthony. Now, for me, unless they go on a big stretch of winning, winning 7 out of 10, something like that, as you noted, for me, they're not going to go anywhere. And their playoff odds are like at 25%, as you said. So how I view it is that they have to retool and start doing it sooner than later. So do you think we're on the verge of that happening, a big-time retooling that actually becomes a fire sale if they don't have that hot streak at some point rather soon?
No, I don't really like the term fire sale just because, look, they don't have a lot of guys. They don't have enough guys to trade to consider it a fire sale. I mean, I think the prime guys, and I don't think any of this is going to happen now. I don't think really it would happen until after the All-Star break. Hearing what I'm hearing about the trade market, there's so many teams still in the race. There's no distinction between contenders and pretenders at this point. And look, you haven't really heard much about J.D. Martinez interest from the national reporters. It's because right now there might not be a ton of interest. Now, at some point there will be. But in terms of the moves that they can make the deadline, I think obviously JD is front and center. Justin Wilson certainly could be traded. Alex Avila certainly could be traded. I think Ian Kinder's a bit of a long shot. You just look at the look at the teams' contention that need a second baseman, there's simply not many of them there. And Kinsler, to me, is, look, the Tigers have pretty good young starting pitching. All right? They have Michael Fulmer, they have Daniel Norris. Matt Boyd's obviously in AAA Toledo, but I think Matt Boyd was pretty impressive for the first month or so of the season before he fell on some hard times. They have some pretty impressive young starting pitching, and to me, Ian Kinsler's a guy that he's going to be the biggest decision, and he's going to be the tipping point in which direction the Tigers go, because to me, he's the difference between winning and losing teams. He's that kind of guy. Kinsler's a stud, and if you want to keep him around for another year, then I think you might have an outside chance of competing next season. But I think the guys to move at the deadline could be JD, Justin Wilson, Alex Avila, and perhaps even Jose Iglesias, especially with the way he's hitting the ball as of late.
Speaking of JD, you polled some rival executives recently, and one of them I know specifically, believe it was an American League scout that had said that they could get a number 2, number 4 prospect in a team's farm system right now. And the article was about, whether to deal him now for that kind of a haul in return or to wait. It sounds like you're thinking they're going to wait, but I mean, at the end of the day, do they have to deal JD Martinez regardless of whether or not they deal him now or closer to that July 31 non-waiver trade deadline?
Probably. I mean, it's certainly looking that way. I mean, look, it's just they can get an influx of young talent for it. And not only that, but they could also, if they were still in contention, they could also trade JD Martinez for guys that could help them now, perhaps, even though, like one evaluator said, is that, a lot of teams near the deadline are going to want to be trading major league rate players now because they're trying to add. They're not trying to subtract in that regard. But, I mean, I think certainly it's the most likely scenario. Look where the Tigers are. They're old and they're slow, and they need to somehow inject some more life in that farm system. It's just completely barren. You can't wait on, last year's first round pick and the year before, the Bolt Bureaus, the Motown, because those guys are still 3-4 years away. So I think the prudent move would probably be to trade JD now. If they somehow won 20 straight games and they were in first place, well, no, they're probably not going to trade JD just because he's been one of the best hitters in baseball so far. But yeah, I would expect that if the market bears that out, and I think there's definitely, perhaps, I don't know, since we were talking about the odds really, maybe a 40% chance that they don't get the kind of haul that many people expected just because the market doesn't play out the way that many believe.
Yeah, I think it would take something drastic. Anthony Fenech of the Detroit Free Press on with me for episode number 96 of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I think it would take something drastic for the Tigers not to eventually trade J.D. Martinez, who I think they should look to get position players in return for. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and I think I agree with you. And I think they probably should have drafted some more position players in the draft this year. But honestly, as you know, their MO has been big power pitching, righties, college guys. Their first round pick, Alex Vito, he seems to be pretty good. But I think you're seeing the team with the Astros and the Cubs, even the Phillies to a point, teams that have had success in the draft as of late, they've been taking a lot of position players because those players are paying more dividends at the big league level than the pitchers are. And the pitchers should be a lot more volatile in terms of pitchers get hurt. And if you can find a premium position player, it really, really helps your team out for a long time. So I would have liked to have seen them take more position players. They took 2 catchers in the first, 6 or 7 rounds. Would have liked to see them take more position players, but overall, talking to one evaluator with the draft, he said it was at least optimistic, which is better than things that have been said in the past.
Anthony, we think they can get a huge haul in return for JD, obviously. Now, how about for the likes of Justin Upton and Alex Avila, if those guys are dangled out there on the open market? What could they land in return for those 2 guys who right now, believe it or not, are the 2 highest Tigers in terms of wins above replacement? Upton first at 2.5 wins above replacement. Avila second at 2.3, according to BaseballReference.com.
I'm just not convinced another team's going to take him and Justin Upton contract with the possibility that he does not opt out at the end of the season, and then he's going to be, still locked in for another $88.5 million. I just don't think that he's the kind of player that's going to be able to get traded that easily, and even if he does, he's not going to bring in a big return because, again, the team that receives him will be looking at it as we're taking on a not a risk, but we're taking out a sizable amount of salary for a very long period of time. And simply put, that's not how teams operate these days. They're much more unwilling to give up their prospects. It's more about youth and flexibility, and the Tigers don't have any of that. So I don't really think there's a chance Justin Upton gets traded. Alex Avila should probably get a pretty good prospect, I'd say. I mean, this is a guy that's, he swings left-handed, he's hitting the heck out of the ball, he plays first base, he catches, he's a good defensive catcher, tons of game-calling experience. So I think maybe two lower-level prospects, one mid-level prospect for Alex Avila. I definitely think the Tigers should get something for him because he's on a very cost-friendly contract. He's having a great year, too.
And now, Anthony, the guy responsible for making these decisions is Alex Avila's father, Al Avila, the general manager of the Detroit Tigers. And I think this is a very vital trade deadline that is nearing for Al Avila and company in that Tigers front office. And a lot of blame recently has been placed upon his shoulders for the Tigers' lackluster ways as a whole. And I've got to ask you, with that being said, right now, what do you think of his job security? How safe is his job really in that Tigers front office?
I think it's relatively safe. He gets along well with the owner, Chris Illich. But I mean, again, I agree with you. This is a crucial deadline for them because they got to hit on some of these trades that they make. Because I mean, look, the job that Al is signing, everybody thinks Mike Pelfrey signing, Mark Lowe signing, which were terrible. Don't get me wrong, but he also traded for Justin Wilson. He traded for Francisco Rodriguez. And last year, he got 44 saves. Those were really low cost. He didn't really trade much for those guys. I think that the book is still out on Al. The thing that people fail to realize a little bit is this isn't just as easy as starting a rebuilding project. He first has to deconstruct his team, whose payroll is at nearly $200 million. First got to deconstruct the team, then rebuild it. So it's really kind of a twofold operation here. And, I can't see the future. I mean, whether or not he's the guy to turn this around, I really couldn't give you an answer based on what he's done so far, because I think this is something that we as Tigers, as people that follow the Tigers, we're going to be seeing a different period of Tigers baseball coming up. I don't think, Dave Dombrowski's never tasked doing this. Al worked with Dave for so long, and so I think this is going to be different for everybody involved. But I do think that Al, in the deals he's done, he's made good trades, he's made bad free agent signings, and I think one of the things is that if he could go back, I don't know if the Upton deal is something they would have done, but I mean that's something that the owner wanted. So Al's boss wanted that done, so he had to get it done. So I don't know, it's kind of a mixed bag so far, but I think having a good trade deadline, if they do so choose to trade some of these guys, would be a big step in the rebuild process that looks to be on the horizon.
Really quick, though, if you had to make a bold prediction right now, and I'm actually making you do it, Anthony, sorry about that, but do you see Ausmus and Avila keeping their jobs in 2018?
Let me see here. This might be too status quo, but I'd go yes. I mean, I definitely think that Al is going to keep his job for sure. I mean, he's still got 3 more years left on his contract, I believe, or 2. Brad is a different story, but I tend to think that if the Tigers go in the rebuild mode that many think they will, I tend to think that Brad will keep his job because he's a younger guy. He gets along with the players well. So from that regard, I guess I'll go yes on both accounts, but I don't know if the fans will be happy about that.
I don't think they will be. I don't think I will be either. And Anthony, with that, I'll let you go here on episode number 96 of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company.
Cool, man. Keep up the good work.
Thank you much. Have a great day. And back here on episode number 96 of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company, that was the Detroit Tigers beat writer for the Detroit Free Press, Anthony Fenech, who does a very solid job there covering the Tigers. And you know what? I'm going to tell you this, Doc. It's a very hard job to have now for him because I think the Tigers are going to be really, really active come, this trade deadline. And because of that, he's going to be working overtime, trust me, covering all these deals, all this wheeling and dealing from Al Avila and company in that Tigers front office.
Great stuff from Ryan Ford, Anthony Fenech. Man, you put him on the spot there, trying to, foreshadow what's going to happen with Brad Ausmus and Al Avila. But for me, the way I kind of am looking at it, if you're going to start a rebuild, why don't you just start all over? Just let go of Al Avila, let go of Brad Ausmus, start fresh. I really feel like the Tigers haven't fully embraced sabermetrics. And if you find a general manager and a complete team that will utilize sabermetrics, because if the money's not there, if the money's going to be tight, then you have to go after an athlete. You have to go after ball players in your drafts that are going to be definitely, sabermetric friendly, and you have to really utilize advanced sabermetrics to foreshadow what these guys are potentially able to do. And Vito, it's no coincidence that Houston has basically overhauled their front office and have really implemented sabermetrics to evaluate talent, and look what they're doing. The proof is in the pudding. If you don't have the funds to go out there and buy talent and to go out there and just pay a bunch of talented individuals a lot of money, then the next best thing is to fill a front office full of smart guys that can help you pick players that will help you on the cheap. So that's what's in the future, I think, for the Tigers with Al Avila gone and Brad Ausmus gone in 2018.
Really quick, you know what? To fill the front office with smart guys like you and I, or just me, Big V.
Just Vito.
There we go. Thank you for that compliment.
Now, Vito, I want to end this podcast and give those that maybe did not pay attention fully throughout the entire hour, because I kind of notice listening patterns with podcasts. Sometimes you're listening a little bit actively, sometimes passively if you're on your walk. So at the end of your podcast, I want you to give Big Vito's highlights of episode 96.
Well, you know what? I will tell you that the Tigers, right now where they sit in the American League Central, it is more and more telling of the fact that the Tigers have to go into a full-on sell mode. And the Indians are coming on. They actually just swept the previously American League Central first place Minnesota Twins in a 4-game series over the weekend. They have a 6-game winning streak. All of that screams at me, Doc, that the Indians are for real. They're ready to take off, and everybody else in the American League Central, good luck to you. It's time to sell off pieces, and especially for the Tigers, who, by the way, I wanted to leave you guys with this very factoid here about the Tigers. It is that this season, they have yet to have a winning month. In April, 500, 12-12. In May, 13-16. So far in June, going into this recording on Tuesday, 7-9. Not very good, not cutting the mustard seed, and it's why they've got to sell off pieces, and I think they will decide to do so rather soon here as well, Doc.
And you and I disagree regarding the ability to boo Miguel Cabrera. It sounds like I disagree with the panel as well. I'm the only outlier, but I feel like if you pay your hard-earned money, then there is nobody that is so powerful, that is so above reproach that you can't boo him. That's what you sign up for. That's my opinion. You can boo Miguel Cabrera. You can boo even, Hal Newhouser, Al Kaline, if they're going to stink up the joint. You pay your hard-earned money, you boo all you want, and the reason why fans boo is because they want to cheer.
So if you're buying hot and ready's Little Caesar pizzas at Comerica Park, you can boo whoever you want. That is your opinion, and you know what? I'll accept that. And I think other Tigers fans have largely accepted that too when it comes to booing Detroit Tigers this season. Doc, with that, thank you much, and thank you to our guests from the Detroit Free Press, and Mr. Ryan Ford and Mr. Anthony Fenech. Guys, we'll talk to you again next Wednesday.
You can download all the podcasts on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network via our website, DetroitSportsPodcast.com.